Patrick, Quentin, Q.Patrick and Jonathan Stagge were pen names under which Hugh Callingham Wheeler, Richard Wilson Webb, Mott, Kelley and Mary Louise White Aswell wrote detective fiction. In some foreign countries the books have been published under the variant Quentin Patrick. Most of the stories were written by Webb and Wheeler in collaboration, or by Wheeler alone. Their most famous creation is the amateur sleuth Peter Duluth. In 1963, the story collection The Ordeal of Mrs. Snow was given a special Edgar Award by the Mystery Writers of America. History. In 1931, Richard Wilson Webb and Mott Kelley collaborated on the detective novel Cottage Sinister. Kelley was known as Patsy and Webb as Rick, so they created the pseudonym Q.Patrick by combining the nicknames, adding the Q, because it was unusual. Webb's and Kelley's literary partnership ended with Kelley's marriage to Stephen Wilson. Webb continued to write under the Q.Patrick name, while looking for a new writing partner. Although he wrote 2 novels with the journalist and Harper's Bazaar editor Mary Louise Aswell, he would find his permanent collaborator in Hugh Wheeler, a Londoner who had moved to the U.S. in 1934. Wheeler's and Webb's first collaboration was published in 1936. The same year, they introduced 2 new pseudonyms. Murder Gone to Earth, the first novel featuring Dr. Westlake, was credited to Jonathan Stagge, a name they would continue to use for the rest of the Westlake series. A Puzzle for Fools introduced Peter Duluth and was signed Patrick Quentin. This would become the primary and most famous pen name, even though they also continued to use Q.Patrick until the end of the collaboration. In the late 1940s, Webb's contributions gradually decreased due to health problems. For the 1950s and on, Wheeler continued writing as Patrick Quentin on his own, and also had 1 book published under his own name. In the 1960s and 70s, Wheeler achieved success as a playwright and librettist, and his output as Quentin Patrick slowed and then ceased altogether after 1965. However, Wheeler did write the book for the 1979 musical Sweeney Todd about a fictional London mass murderer, showing he had not altogether abandoned the genre. Writing. The early Q.Patrick detective stories generally follow the Golden Age whodunit conventions, with elaborate puzzle mysteries reminiscent of Agatha Christie or John Dixon Carr. From the time when Wheeler joined the writing, the stories become more psychologically acute with increasingly realistic, fleshed-out characters. In the 1940s, the stories start to move away from the traditional detective pattern. Puzzle for Fiends is a Hitchcockian thriller, Puzzle for Pilgrims a film noir in written form, and Run to Death a pulpy spy novel. The majority of the Webb-Wheeler collaborations feature one of the recurring characters. Peter Duluth, a Broadway director, World War II veteran and recovering alcoholic who, with his wife Iris, always seems to stumble across murders. Inspector Timothy Trant of the New York Police, a Princeton-educated dandy whose remorseless investigations often seem to be aimed at some innocent person before he reveals his real target, and the country doctor, Dr. Hugh Cavendish Westlake with his daughter Dawn. When Webb bowed out on the writing, these characters disappeared or receded into the background. The late Patrick Quentin novels are increasingly dark and brooding. Deceit and betrayal, particularly adultery, already a frequent theme, becomes even more central. Although at the end of the story the murder is solved, the impact of the crime, and the corruption uncovered in the investigation, remain. Legacy. At one time a relatively popular mystery writer, Quentin has largely fallen into obscurity in the US, his works out of print. He probably remains more well-known in Scandinavia, where he used to be among the most famous detective writers, although his reputation is fading also there. A few of Quentin's stories have been filmed, most notably the Peter Duluth mystery Black Widow, which was filmed under the title by 20th Century Fox in 1954 as a color CinemaScope feature. Van Heflin portrayed the Peter Duluth character, who for some reason was renamed Peter Denver. Works as Q.Patrick Cottage Sinister 1931. Murder at the Women's City Club 1932. Murder at the Varsity 1933. SS Murder 1933. The Grindle Nightmare 1935. Death Goes to School 1936. Death for Dear Clara 1937 with Inspector Trant. The File on Fenton and Farr 1938. The File on Claudia Cragg 1938 with Inspector Trant. Death and the Maiden 1939 with Inspector Trant. Return to the Scene 1941. Danger Next Door 1952. As Patrick Quentin. A Puzzle for Fools 1936 with Peter Duluth. Puzzle for Players 1938 with Peter Duluth. Puzzle for Puppets 1944 with Peter Duluth. Filmed as Homicide for Three. Puzzle for Wantons 1945 with Peter Duluth. Puzzle for Fiends 1946 with Peter Duluth. Filmed in the UK as The Strange Awakening. US title Female Friends. Puzzle for Pilgrims 1947 with Peter Duluth. Run to Death 1948 with Peter Duluth. The Follower 1950. Black Widow 1952 with Peter Duluth and Inspector Trant. Filmed as Black Widow. My Son, the Murderer 1954 with Peter Duluth and Inspector Trant. The Man with Two Wives 1955 with Inspector Trant. Filmed as Suma Fatari by Shindo Kaneto. The Man in the Net 1956 filmed as The Man in the Net. Suspicious Circumstances 1957. Shadow of Guilt 1959 with Inspector Trant. Filmed as L'Homme Femmes. The Green-Eyed Monster 1960. The Ordeal of Mrs. Snow 1961, a short story collection. The title story was filmed for TV as an episode of the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. The Ordeal of Mrs. Snow. Family Skeletons 1965 with Inspector Trant. Filmed for TV as Familienchand. The Puzzles of Peter Duluth. Crippen and Amp. Landru Publishers. 2016. Short stories. As Jonathan Stagge. Murder Gone to Earth 1936 with Dr. Westlake. Murderer Mercy 1937 with Dr. Westlake. The Stars Spell Death 1939 with Dr. Westlake. Turn of the Table 1940 with Dr. Westlake. The Yellow Taxi 1942 with Dr. Westlake. The Scarlet Circle 1943 with Dr. Westlake. Death, My Darling Daughters 1945 with Dr. Westlake. Death's Old Sweet Song 1946 with Dr. Westlake. The Three Fears 1949 with Dr. Westlake. Is Hugh Wheeler the Crippled Muse 1951. As Mary Louise White. Aswell Fartigo 1957.